Most of the advice you find in blogs and popular articles make recommendations for dealing with your low energy based on an idea that's been common wisdom for decades. Dr. Roy Baumeister's strength model of self-control. The most famous experiments have volunteers from two groups facing two plates of food. One group was free to choose from the plate with cookies or the plate with radishes. In other words, they didn't have to exercise self-control. They had the autonomy to choose what to eat. The other group was told they could only eat from the plate of radishes, needing to exercise a high degree of self-control not to eat the cookies. Then both groups were asked to solve puzzles that were impossible to solve. The hypothesis was that those who had expended willpower not to eat cookies would not have as much energy for solving the puzzle. In other words, self-regulating through willpower drains the brain of the energy needed to continue self-regulation. And that's exactly what happened. Those who would avoid eating the cookies gave up sooner on solving the puzzle. These experiments led to a conclusion. Willpower is a limited resource. Your brain is like a muscle. After you use it, it's fatigued and just gives out. Advice for replenishing the brain's energy fell to common wisdom for replenishing physical energy. Eat right, sleep well, exercise regularly, and relax your brain through meditation or other methods. Now, I'm all in for nutritious eating, exercise, sleep, and meditation, but I struggled with Baumeister's conclusions. Something didn't ring true. Think about your own experience. Have you ever had a great night's sleep, exercised, eaten well, and you still have to drag yourself out of bed to face the day? I mean, what's that about? Have you ever been exhausted, had every right to be exhausted, but found yourself staying up all night to work on a project or to talk to someone you're madly in love with? So I was not surprised in 2016 when studies refuted the concepts of willpower and ego depletion. I was also not surprised that the fall of the strength model gave rise to alternatives supported by motivation science. The fatal flaw in Baumeister's research was misinterpreting the correlation of low energy, willpower, ego depletion, and the limited nature of energy. You see, the brain isn't like a muscle that gets exhausted from use. Rather, when you experience low energy, it's either because you don't have the nutrients necessary to generate physical energy, or, and this is the key, you don't have the nutriments necessary to generate psychological energy or motivation. Baumeister's experiments set up people for suboptimal motivation. See, volunteers who gave up on their puzzles had low energy to continue because the three nutriments required to generate positive and sustainable psychological energy, choice, connection, and competence, were undermined. When volunteers didn't have a choice to eat from both plates, their choice was taken away. When working on a meaningless puzzle that couldn't be solved, their connection and competence were undermined. You see, willpower reflects suboptimal motivation that diminishes the quality of energy that you can access in the short and long term. The conclusion that Baumeister came to was that if your brain is exhausted from using willpower, then the brain has limited resources. Not only is this an erroneous conclusion, but researchers such as Carol Dweck have found that believing that your brain is limited in the amount of energy it can create becomes a limiting and perhaps dangerous self-fulfilling prophecy. People who believe that their brain is a muscle that is exhausted with use tend to experience just that. What Baumeister's experiments fail to acknowledge is that you don't have to suffer the effects of suboptimal motivation. As self-determination theory proves, you have access to another type of psychological energy, optimal motivation. When you experience choice, connection, and competence, you generate optimal motivation that leads to vitality, the type of positive and sustainable energy required for health, well-being, creativity, innovation, and resilience. Remember, when low energy lets you down, psychological vitality picks you up.